Is she hot?
She may or may not be wearing a wig.
That guy's dead. That guy's deader than that 8-year-old. One's got to be the good angel, I get it. But one of you got to be the devil. God damn it, support me on my journey to hell. You can't get herpes and the clap, right? Hey, I'm asking the tough questions around here. My dick can't fall off twice.
Oh yeah, that'll come in handy.
Speaking of coming, are you pooping? I felt that one in my plums. That's right. Fuck me sideways. I love you, Jay. All right, here we go.
Goddamn fucking Hadouken. Oh, I'm going to prison.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dual Threat Podcast. This week, we'll be breaking down action from Week 3 of the NFL season. There were a lot of close games this week in the NFL as 8 games were decided by 7 points or less. The same can't be said for the Gridiron Gala matchups as 4 of the 5 were very lopsided. The average margin of victory was 61 fantasy points, and 3 teams put up over 128 points. Holy shit. It was a tale of the haves and the have-nots this week, as many matchups were decided before the afternoon games even kicked off. Some results were very surprising, but a lot of studs shined on Sunday, so let's get into the results, starting with the news and notes from around the league.
There it is.
Uh-oh.
Hot take.
Oh, we got breaking news.
Breaking
news.
Breaking news.
Before we get to the news and notes, we have breaking Gridiron Gala news.
Apparently, to kick off my matchup with Tony this week, he's already changed his team name. Tony's new team name is, to be blunt, your cousin's a hunt.
Now moving on to news and notes from around the league. Tyler Eifert, tight end, Cincinnati Bengals. Tyler Eifert, back knee, is uncertain when he will return. Eifert isn't looking likely to be back on the field in Week 4. It appears as if A.J. Green was the main beneficiary of Eifert's absence, as he was targeted 13 times for 10 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. Without a clear timetable to return for Eifert, he will most likely remain on the waiver wire for the time being. Sam Bradford, quarterback, Minnesota Vikings. Sam Bradford, knee, is uncertain for Week 4. Coach Mike Zimmer called Bradford day-to-day. He also confirmed Bradford will remain the team starter despite Case Keenum's explosive Week 3. Julio Jones, wide receiver, Atlanta Falcons. Julio Jones is dealing with a lower back injury and will be limited in practice this week. Jones picked up the injury at some point in Sunday's narrow win over the Lions. Coach Dan Quinn didn't seem too concerned about Jones's Week 4 status, but it's obviously something to monitor. Jordan Howard, shoulder, is absent from the Bears' Week 4 injury report. It is a major surprise given the way how Howard was favoring his shoulder on Sunday. Either way, Howard produced like he was at full health against the Steelers, and he'll be needed for a major workload in Thursday's game against the Packers. Kelvin Benjamin, wide receiver, Carolina Panthers. An MRI revealed no structural damage to Kelvin Benjamin's left knee, but his Week 4 status is unclear. Coach Ron Rivera didn't have much of an update beyond Benjamin's MRI news. We will have to monitor his practice participation throughout the week. Now, enough about NFL news. Let's get to the big news in the Gridiron Gala. Let's talk about the big trades that went down last Thursday afternoon. It all started with the trade between Gomez and Slater, with Slater receiving quarterback Trevor Siemian, wide receiver Cooper Kupp, and running back Latavius Murray, as well as a 2018 fifth-round draft pick. Gomez received quarterback Matthew Stafford and wide receiver Terrell Pryor. Nor, instant reaction, who won this trade?
In a vacuum, just looking at this as a single-serving trade, I'd have to give the nod to Gomez. He's getting starter-caliber players. Without looking at their matchups week to week, he's going to be able to plug these guys in from the get. Clearly, Slater had some other plans, as we're about to get into, but just this trade by itself, it's a Gomez win.
All good points, Nor. I feel like Slater bailed too fast on Pryor here. To be so high on him in the offseason, to pay him a $35 salary, I think 2 weeks on a new team is too small of a sample size for the talented wideout. I know this trade may have been for salary clearing purposes for Slater's next trade, which we will talk about next, but if Pryor performs anywhere near Slater's offseason expectations of the next 2 seasons, this trade seems pretty lopsided as Pryor projects as a prototypical wide receiver 1. So it turns out this trade was just the appetizer. The calm before the storm, as Slater and myself pulled off the first quote-unquote blockbuster trade of the season. as Slater received running backs Le'Veon Bell, Kerwin Williams, Jamal Williams, wide receiver Alshon Jeffrey, and a 2018 fifth-round pick, while I received running backs Carlos Hyde, Joe Mixon, wide receiver Doug Baldwin, and a 2018 second-round pick. Nor, you've had time to digest this trade. Let me give you my thoughts, and we'll go into your thoughts on this subject after that. So, the beauty of this podcast is we can take you into the thought process of the moves we make and perhaps outline some method to the madness. So to understand my thought process, you really had to have owned Le'Veon Bell and Alshon Jeffrey for the past 2.5 seasons. I admit this move was made a bit out of frustration as their upsides are obviously much higher than Hyde and Baldwin. But if Le'Veon Bell isn't suspended or holding out or injured, he's typically underperforming on the field. When he hits, he hits. But I feel as though the league may be catching on to his disciplined rushing style. That slow, methodical pace, waiting for the defense to over-pursue, it allows teams to play slow and keep their lane responsibilities intact and bottle up Bell pretty easily. Which is why I think we have seen his expansion of his usage in the receiving game. Hyde may have a long injury history as well, but in my opinion, Bell isn't much more durable than Hyde, and neither has a surefire handcuff to protect a Bell or Hyde injury. So, they're very similar in that fashion. Now, Alshon and Baldwin are a wash to me if they're both performing at their apex, and I have faith the Seahawks will pull off their typical mid-year renaissance. So the kicker in this deal was getting Joe Mixon on that cheap rookie deal. I had planned on taking Mixon with one of my 3 first-round picks in this year's draft. I think the change in offensive coordinator only helps, and even if Mixon shares time with Jeremy Hill this season, there's no way Hill is on the roster next year, and I think Mixon profiles as an absolute stud and was my second highest rated rookie runner behind Fournette, ahead of McCaffrey and ahead of Dalvin Cook. So to pick him up in this deal really sealed it for me, and that was a lot on my end. I might have touched on some things that you want to talk about, but what are your thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, you did hit on a lot of things that I wanted to chime in on about as well. The Mixon addition is clearly an easy place to jump off. His upside is clear. The usage in that backfield is sort of starting to come to the surface now. The offense coordinator change, you never really know what type of impact that's going to have in terms of how offense is shaped. But getting him on the rookie deal, and let's not look beyond the fact that you also got a second-round pick out of this. That pick can totally be very valuable, both in other trade offers or just in next year's draft, which appears to be very loaded. Going beyond that, comparing Bell and Hyde in terms of injury and or upside, I get the nod there and the correlatives, but I think similar to what you're saying about Terrell Pryor and maybe having the panic button be hit a little too quickly or the parachute pulled a little too quickly on him with Slater giving to Gomez, I kind of feel like the same token can be given to Bell here. Yeah, maybe defenses have caught up with his patient running style, but having sat out the entire preseason, maybe it's just purely a factor of him just not being in game shape yet. And also, the home road split with the Steelers offense always seems to be a bit of a conundrum in and of itself. Additionally, adding Doug Baldwin to the existing Seattle Seahawks stack that you have with Russell Wilson and Jimmy Graham means that week to week you are going to be relying on them. I know given their offensive line issues that could be a little scary, but on certain weeks when they manage to boom, you're going to get a lot of points.
Yeah, it was nice to see a bounce-back performance from the Seahawks offense against the Titans this week. I really benefited from Russell Wilson's career or record-setting performance for himself. And it seemed as though all of the players I received in trade this week performed very well. Even Joe Mixon received a majority of the touches in that Cincinnati backfield. So it looks like I'm ahead in this trade as of right now, but it's only week 3. Le'Veon Bell is a superstar, so this could all blow up in my face at any moment.
A 60-time explosion. Okay.
I have no illusions of grandeur here, but we'll see how it plays out. All right, so those are the breakdowns of the 2 big trades this week. We're also going to bring up some waiver wire transactions that took place last week. Obviously, waivers haven't run yet this week. Let's talk about last week's pickups as we're recording this on Tuesday. A few things that stood out to me. Slater cut bait very quickly on Terrell Pryor, and it appears as well Tyler Eifert, as Tyler Eifert was dropped last week in favor of Colts tight end Jack Doyle, which is funny because I think Jack Doyle ended with -1, so Tyler Eifert would have been the better start. This seems like a move made out of frustration, as Eifert is uber talented but just can't stay on the field. Believe me, I know the frustration that comes with owning an uber talented player that doesn't perform. Any thoughts on this Tyler Eifert drop?
I think given the amount of time that Eifert has spent on the injury report, bodes for getting dropped eventually. I was someone that drafted Tyler Eifert when he first came into the league. I'm totally a believer in his upside and his ability, but he has just not been able to stay healthy. And when he does get hurt, he seems to take extra long to get back into playing health.
All right, moving on. Kevin keeps taking shots at the running back dartboard as he picked up Samaje Perine and dropped Jeremy Hill. I assume he's going to take another shot in the dark this week at achieving a starting running back, as his team only seems about 3 running backs away from being unstoppable.
An unstoppable force.
Nor your thoughts on Kevin's strategy here of neglecting the running back position and just taking shot after shot each week at a running back from the waiver wire.
So Kevin's proven that picking between specific matchups, he's had the golden touch so far. So I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. In relation to being broken, Jeremy Hill's fantasy value is completely tanked. I think the changed offensive coordinator has proven that they're already planning for next year when Hill's not on the team. Samaje Perine did have a fumble in this game, so you don't know if he's going to be in the doghouse yet or not. But the upside is there in terms of what we saw from him in Oklahoma last year. Also, Rob Kelly is the only back ahead of him right now, and he's prone to be banged up. We've already seen him miss a little time. So the Redskins' backfield is a harder one to figure out, but Kevin's already shown that he's up for the challenge.
Okay, and finally, for the waiver wire segment here, a more recent transaction, the recent demise of one Adrian Peterson. Your thoughts? It's been an illustrious career for Peterson. I doubt he gets picked up and stashed at any point this year, barring a Mark Ingram injury. What are your thoughts? This could be the last time that Adrian Peterson's owned on a Gridiron Gala fantasy roster.
It's tough to see with a player that's done so well in fantasy for so long, like Adrian Peterson. But, you know, we've seen a younger running back, rookie running back, kind of renaissance the last 2 years or so. Maybe even the last 3 years if you go back to Todd Gurley and Melvin Gordon's rookie years. So the older running backs, I mean, someone's got to get phased out when you've got an influx of talent at the position like we've seen. This year, rookie running backs they're the new hotness. So certainly sad to see, but it's the way the fantasy cookie crumbles.
Yeah, definitely right. Sad to see Adrian Peterson go. Let's pour one out for Adrian Peterson here. I think we'll all remember him as the first memorable player in that initial auction draft where he went to $70 to Mike Ferralis. Still the same cap, so definitely a first laughable splash there. It was only a 1-year deal, but I think we'll always remember Adrian Peterson for that. Definitely not the yards or the Hall of Fame career or the savage beating of his child, but definitely that $70 initial contract. Now that we got the news and notes out of the way, let's move on to the matchup review from Week 3 of the NFL. Matchup 1, Jason versus Kevin.
Kevin.
Man of the match, got to be Chris Hogan. Hogan came through in a big way last Sunday with 4 catches for 68 yards and 2 touchdowns, totaling 18 fantasy points against a banged-up Texans defense. Hogan really boosted Kevin to the early lead he needed to remove all doubt from this matchup. Biggest disappointment. Lots of candidates to choose from here on Jason's team, but I think the pair of Raiders, Derek Carr and Marshawn Lynch, really let Jason down on Sunday Night Football with a putrid 5 combined points from his quarterback and running back. It was an embarrassing performance, and Jason really had all hope squashed early in that Sunday night game as the entire Raiders offense sputtered. My overall thoughts of the matchup? Kevin continues to be one of the best defensive teams in the league as Jason scored 53 points below his weekly scoring average. So far, opponents playing Kevin through 3 weeks are averaging 31 points fewer than when they play any other opponent.
We have found the witch, may we burn her?
No doubt, this has played into Kevin's strong 3-0 start, but in Kevin's defense, he is averaging 86 points per matchup as well, which isn't too shabby. Jason's team crumbled here, and it remains to be seen if this was just a down week for Jason's players or a sign of things to come. Jason dropped to 1-2 as Kevin stays undefeated at 3-0. Matchup 2.
Corey versus Tony.
Man of the match, Jordan Howard. Howard really excelled at home this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, touching the ball 28 times for a combined 164 yards and 2 touchdowns, finishing with 25 fantasy points. It was surprising to see his usage in the passing game, as it appeared Tariq Cohen had locked down that role, but Howard outtouched Cohen's 28-16, so the pecking order has really solidified itself. This was a close game for the Bears, though, and it remains to be seen how many competitive games the Bears will be involved in moving forward. Biggest disappointment. The Seattle Seahawks defense really crumbled against the exotic smash-mouth looks given to them by the Tennessee Titans. The Seahawks allowed 33 total points and garnered no sacks, no turnovers, finishing with -2 fantasy points. Seattle's defense struggled for the first time this season, and it may be expected moving forward for this type of scenario to play out when the Hawks are away from home against a physical offense.
In our first episode, we touched on the blind romance that Corey seems to have for the Seahawks defense. And this is part of the reason we brought it into question. From week to week, whether they're at home or they're on the road, they're just a completely different defense. And even in games at home, you never know when a shootout could happen. So investing the heavy capital in their defense, unless he's going to play them matchup-wise, I'm not sure if you can trust him week to week.
Yeah, the Seahawks defense really seems to be struggling, especially on the back end. Their safeties and corners seem to be hesitant to make tackles in the open field. The Legion of Boom seems to be struggling as Carlos Hyde and DeMarco Murray / Derrick Henry have both run all over that defense the last 2 weeks. So a little disappointing on that, and Corey has to be worried about that, and that's why they're my disappointment of the week. Overall thoughts. This was an impressive showing from Tony's team as he finished with 135 fantasy points, and it was nice to see a bounce-back week from his star wide receivers as they scored a combined 53 fantasy points. Corey is still struggling with the running back position as Gore and Rodgers finished with a combined 12 fantasy points. Brady and Gronk's combined 46 fantasy points weren't enough this week as Corey moves to 1-2 and Tony cruises to 2-1. Matchup 3.
Gomez versus Morales.
For this breakdown, I'd like to bring in a special guest. Last season's runner-up champ and the winner of this closely contested matchup, Alex Gomez.
Hey, Sammy, how you doing? Nora, how you doing?
How you doing?
So we're going to go over a few main aspects of this, and I'll pick your thoughts about this matchup. Thanks for joining us, Gomez. Much appreciated.
I love you.
Whoa!
Blunt?
Wait, what?
Murray.
Did you just get Murray for a third?
I did.
What? So before we talk about anything, it is currently Tuesday night, September 26th at 8:03 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we need to talk about the trade that just went down between yourself and Tony Funston. You're the best guest we've ever had because we can analyze breaking news. So it looks like a trade just went down between yourself and Tony Funston. Tony gave up DeMarco Murray, running back, Tennessee Titans, and you, Gomez, gave up a 2018 third-round pick, and that's it. Tell me, you said you had a long correspondence with Tony about regarding this trade. How did this come to fruition?
It's a very surprising trade, I know, for everybody. Call me Ari Gold because I make shit happen. It's something that Tony and I have kind of been working on for the better part of the past month. Not necessarily DeMarco Murray, but Tony and I have a good relationship, and we decided to do business. It took a while. I was a little hesitant at first, but as you can tell, my running backs are basically waiver wire talent. But DeMarco is going to be my bell cow now, and I anticipate winning more matchups this year. Tony is a very honorable man. Tony.
Did you make him an offer he couldn't refuse?
I had to. Had to do it. He needed cap space. I needed talent. It was a match made in heaven. It worked out. I know that there's going to be some people in the league that are going to be a little envious of the trade. But, you know, one team got better. Tony will get better next year.
Yeah, let me pull back the curtain here. There's going to be two teams, at least, in this room that are envious, and that's myself and Nor, because DeMarco Murray, though he struggled this season, he just had his best game of the year, and you picked him up for peanuts. I mean, third-round picks in our league. It's not much to go on for a back as talented as DeMarco Murray. I mean, Nort, can I bring you in here for your thoughts?
And my reaction to the trade, what? Right off the bat, I think the question is, who else was Tony talking to about moving to Marco Murray? I mean, granted, not everyone had the cap space, but potentially other suitors could have been involved in this transaction. Maybe an NBA-style three-way trade. You never know. At first glance, though, I would have to say, thank you, Gomez, for taking Murray away from the team that I'm playing this week. I guess that's one less guy I got to worry about Tony starting against me. Hopefully he just goes off for you and makes Tony feel terrible.
That's terrible.
Yeah, you know what really sticks out to me is, though Tony may deem Murray dispensable, I'm looking at his running backs now. It's C.J. Anderson, it's Jordan Howard, who just had his breakout game, but then you've got Mark Ingram and LeGarrette Blount. He went from depth at every position. Now he might be shuffling for running back depth. I hope he's got something up his sleeves to get rid of some wide receiver talent, which he is flush with. I will give him that, but he needs to upgrade at running back. If the bye week's hit and he has to start Mark Ingram or LeGarrette Blount, their ability to score over 10 points a week is very low in my opinion. But let's see what Tony pulls out of his sleeve here.
Sam, that is the outlier right there. We don't know what Tony's up to, right? He can definitely flip any one of his top level receivers for another running back. Maybe he wants to package something. C.J. Anderson has had a great year, minus the one last week. But who knows? I think Tony's unpredictable, and he's got something up his sleeve.
That's a great point. Okay, so now that we've got that breaking news analysis out of the way, let's move back to yours and Ferralis's matchup from Week 3. Now, my man of the match is Chris Thompson. What a performance from Thompson as he continues his insanely hot pace, finishing with 24 fantasy points in the Redskins' rout of the Oakland Raiders on Sunday Night Football. Thompson's fantasy points per touch are insane, but Gomez benefited greatly from his third straight productive performance. Biggest disappointment of the match? The pair of Mike's running backs, Isaiah Crowell and Lamar Miller. These two have been quite disappointing this season, and that trend continued this week as they finished with a combined 10 fantasy points. Their yards per carry is abysmal, and both struggle to find the end zone consistently. Overall thoughts. Now, Gomez, you've won the last 2 weeks, but are still only managing 64.5 points per game during that stretch. What are your biggest concerns with your roster moving forward?
I mean, it's obviously the depth. My depth is atrocious. I think my opponents have fallen victim to poor performances. I haven't been scoring that much, let's be honest. I think this proves that fantasy football is a dirty, dirty game. You feel bad for people like Slater, who he has a monster squad, but he's going up against the best teams every week. So it's a crappy game. My depth obviously concerns me a lot, but that's kind of why I made this DeMarco Murray trade.
That's true. Obviously adding to your depth there. So you recently had a roster shakeup with your trade with Alex Slater. How did that play itself out, and what was your thought process on accepting that deal?
Well, I've always been looking for help on with my running backs. That's no secret. Slater was looking for cap relief. I had plenty of it. We decided to engage in some talks. I was very hesitant to give up Cooper Kupp because I feel like he's a star in the making. Not necessarily the Julio Jones type, but somebody that's able to produce on a week-to-week basis in a high-powered offense with the Los Angeles Rams. So that's kind of where we were. He needed cap space. He obviously had other plans in mind, trading with you, getting Le'Veon Bell. So that's kind of how that went down.
Okay, so speaking of your trade with Slater, you're playing Slater in Week 4. Any thoughts or predictions on this matchup?
I got to be 100% honest here. Slater's team is stacked. I feel like his running backs can all score 30 points any given Sunday. I fully expect Slater to show up this week. I just hope that I can score more than 60 points this week, which I haven't really done. Slater reminds me of the Los Angeles Chargers this year. They're just so close in every game. They're better than what their record really is. And either way, I anticipate a good matchup this week.
Okay, very diplomatic of you. Very diplomatic. Let's see if Slater returns the favor in this week's Slater Slanders. So let's juice up this league. I mean, there's been a lot of action in the past 3 or 4 days, but let's give everyone an idea of how tradable some of your players are for the right offer. I'll give you a player's name, and you give me a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being untouchable, and 5 being very willing to mingle.
Sure.
All right, let's start with Chris Thompson.
Chris Thompson. I picked him up from the waiver wire, but he's a 5 for sure.
Okay. He's right now the number 3 scoring running back in fantasy right now, but he's a 5 and being very willing to mingle. All right, how about Michael Crabtree?
Michael Crabtree would be I'd say a 3.
Okay. How about Matt Stafford? I'm sorry, his mother would not appreciate that. Matthew Stafford.
Yes, Mr. Matty room temperature. I'd have to give him a 5. He's expendable.
Okay. And finally, the rookie wide receiver, Corey Davis.
Corey Davis is an absolute 1. I feel I may be the only one that feels this way, but to me, Corey Davis is the future of the NFL. That is my 2 cents.
Okay. See, I'm putting it out there so now people don't waste your time by trying to trade for Corey Davis. You're
Okay.
welcome.
All right. Thank you very much. Sam. I love you.
Okay. All right. So Gomez was once again carried in a low-scoring affair by a couple of outstanding performances, and a recent free agent ads like Duke Johnson and Chris Thompson really fueled Gomez's route to a win this week as they scored a combined 40 of Gomez's 64 fantasy points. Gomez moves to 2-1 on the season as Ferralis moves to 1-2.
Picking up on the quick nods there to both Cooper Kupp and Corey Davis, I'm really high on this rookie receiving class as well. I think Cooper Kupp has already shown a rapport with Jared Goff, and the sky's really the limit for that offense. This is just, we're in month maybe like 3 of the Sean McVay system. They've been averaging somewhere around 35 points a game. So I think Cooper Kupp is going to continue to make fantasy owners happy. And the Corey Davis nod, there's not enough hype on Corey Davis. I think getting to pair him with Mariota just makes a lot of sense for the future. I completely understand him being a 1 Gomez, but don't be surprised if you get some offers.
Get the juices flowing. All right, moving on to matchup number 4.
Nipple versus
Man of the match.
with the man of the match.
Russell Wilson. He finally broke out of his slump on the road against the Tennessee Titans as he set a career high with 373 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Wilson had scored 21 combined points in weeks 1 and 2, so it was a welcome sight to see Wilson score 30 fantasy points in this matchup. The offense really ran through Wilson as the Seahawks defense was being shredded by the Titans offense, and the Hawks were in catch-up mode for the majority of the game.
And I think this was a better example of what we're going to have to see the Seattle offense be this year. That offensive line it was not great in the beginning, and they lost their best O-lineman, left tackle George Fant, in preseason. So I think it's going to be this type of production all year. Russell's going to have to just be on the move, pulling games out of his ass, and just keeping them in it for as long as he can. Part of why I said earlier that your stack of Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin, and Jimmy Graham, some weeks, they're going to just net you a win just by themselves.
All right, moving on to biggest disappointment. Mike's hired guns, LaShawn McCoy and Mike Evans, really let him down in this spot as they scored a combined 12 fantasy points. Their high salaries really put a spotlight on these poor performances as Mike paid $10.75 per fantasy point this week. That's 2 straight subpar games for LaShawn McCoy, and Mike has to be concerned with his star running back's future. Overall thoughts. It was an extremely unfortunate week for Mike as Gillislee, McCoy, Evans, and Julio Jones and Kelsey failed to score a touchdown, and Mike put up a disappointing 61-point performance. On the flip side, it was great to see the pieces acquired in last Thursday's trade with Slater really paid dividends as Hyde and Baldwin scored a combined 37 fantasy points in my 129-61 route of Mike, moving me to 2-1 on the season and Mike to 0-3. For our last and final matchup, we have Slater versus Norv.
Slater versus North Sandugan.
Man of the match.
Man of the man. bitch!
Noor has so many candidates each week, especially in this week when he scored 152 fantasy points.
Holy shit.
But it is hard to overlook Todd Gurley's 31-point performance way back on Thursday Night Football. In an unexpected wild shootout with the 49ers, Gurley had 33 total touches for 149 total yards and 3 touchdowns. Noor's running backs continue to score an obscene amount of fantasy points, and Noor continues to lap the field as this win boosts Noor's fantasy points per week to 123 through 3 weeks. Biggest disappointment, Jay Ajayi really put up a dud against the poor Jets defense as he had 13 total touches for a combined 27 yards and no touchdowns. It was an atrocious effort after his 12-point performance in Week 2. It was a poor effort all around for the Dolphins offense. Luckily, they have a get-right game at home next week against the Saints' 24th-ranked rush defense. Overall thoughts on the matchup, Slater continues to struggle as he can't seem to get all 3 of his stud running backs on the same page. Bell performed well as he finished with 15 fantasy points, but Slater has to be expecting more from his stable of ball carriers. Noor continues to dominate, and if A.J. Green and T.Y. Hilton can perform at anywhere near this level to complement his running backs, he is as close to unstoppable as we have seen in this league.
So my wide receivers, I think it was just there was a lot of a perfect storm element to this. T.Y. Hilton playing against the Browns. That's a matchup I wish could happen every week, but unfortunately it doesn't work that way. And for A.J. Green, I think we alluded to it earlier with the injury to Tyler Eifert. Obviously, more target share went to A.J. Green than normal even. And also, when you have a new offense coordinator, sometimes the first thing they try to do is just simplify everything. So I think a healthy target share for A.J. Green was exactly what the doctor ordered this week. Happy to see that kind of production out of my receivers, but I don't know if I'm going to really expect it every week. For the Todd Gurley matchup on Thursday night, I really expected this to be kind of more of a closer, ugly game. I wasn't really sure what to make of the Rams offense just yet. They had put up some points, but on a short week, you never quite know what the game script is going to look like. For this to turn into the type of game that it ended up becoming, it's truly a surprise to me as well. Obviously, for any kind of solace in a heartbreaking Niners defeat is that at least Todd Gurley helped put Slater away before this matchup even got started.
Okay, with those matchup reviews in the books, let's move on to Week 3's best and worst starts of the week. Let's start with the best start of the week.
It's time for Sam's best start of the week.
For my pick here, going with Chris Thompson, running back, Washington Redskins. Many didn't have faith in Thompson's lack of usage in the Redskins offense, but Gomez had no depth or doubt to pass on this talented back, even against his hometown Raiders on Sunday Night Football. Thompson rewarded Gomez's faith as he still gathered limited touches, but made the most of them on his way to a 24-point fantasy performance. Gomez, let me ask you, was there any doubt about Chris Thompson getting the start this week?
Definitely no doubt starting him just because my depth sucks. But it obviously made me cringe a little bit watching him step all over my beloved Raiders. The Raiders looked in, smelled like dog shit, but Chris Thompson didn't, and I loved it.
So let's move on to the worst start of the week.
Now, the worst start of the week.
You're just a woman with a small brain, with a brain a third the size of us. It's science.
Jaquiz Rogers, running back, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Though Quiz scored 12 points last week, it was on a very poor yards per carry average, and he was non-existent in the passing game. Those trends continued as the Bucs played the stout Minnesota Vikings run defense on the road, and Quiz struggled as he finished with 15 yards on 5 carries. Corey may have been lacking in options at the running back position, but Quiz really was the wrong decision here as he was easily bottled up by the Vikes front 7 in an unfavorable game script.
Pop quiz, hot shot. Wrong. Oh, yeah.
Slater Slanders. Slater Slanders. Slater Slanders. Slater Slanders. Slater Slanders. All right, thanks, guys. Well, welcome back to week 2 of Slater Slanders. It's Tuesday, so we all know what that means. It's death, taxes, and of course, another Slater loss. And to be honest with you guys, I didn't even want to come back and do a second segment of this. I hope you guys liked the first one, but I was really kind of struggling with that. But I thought you can't be a bad sport. Things are going to turn around. You got to keep doing this. So, I really even thought that trade that I made on Thursday with Sam right before the Thursday games, things would turn around, change the vibe a little bit. And of course it didn't. But I thought that having the appeal of Zeke Elliott, Jay Ajayi, Le'Veon Bell, how can you pass that up? I mean, that's sexy as hell. And then, in Sam's defense, he gets back a really good running back for the future. I honestly couldn't wait for his development. I get antsy even after 2 weeks of the shit fest. But I'm scrambling for points as it is. So, I wanted some just immediate talent back. And, Sam gets back a good running back. And, of course, he gets featured the week I trade him, which I thought he was going to be. But, of course, that happens. And then he gets back a nice plug-and-play with Hyde. He's very, very serviceable. Gets you about, he's getting me anywhere from 7 to 10. And, of course, he gets 20. But, I'm walking out of the barbershop, walking home, and I get a text that Hyde got hurt. And I don't know, with the first 5 plays. And immediately I thought, oh no, God damn it, Corey. I immediately thought, I didn't even think twice about Sam, and I traded him. I swear to God, I immediately thought, oh my God, he got it. I mean, of course I thought, damn, that sucks, Sam, but God damn it, Corey, how does he keep doing this? And I know everything's come back on Corey, but, Kevin Bacon has the 7 degrees of separation. Well, Corey's got the 7 degrees of spare. But, seeing that, I just was like, oh, okay. And then Hyde wants to play possum and get back up. He's taking LaShawn McCoy's notes, and he gets up and gets 20. I honestly don't even think it mattered from my point of view. Sorry, Mike, but, of course, he gets that 20 points, and Mixon does really well. So, and Le'Veon actually scores, a touchdown, Zeke, and that's 2 touchdowns. And I was doing it, and I know I mentioned this before, but this is just staggering to me. So in 72 possible quarters this year, besides the quarterback, I have scored 2 touchdowns in 72 possible quarters. That, if you think that is just mind-blowing to me. I think that's incredible. But that's just the way the year's going. But, I just really wanted to touch briefly on that trade I made with Sam. And really, I just wanted to go through the matchups really quick for this week, kind of just give my thoughts on them. Starting with Nor and I's matchup. We got the battle of the 3-headed dragons. I thought it was going to be great. I thought it was going to be a shootout. It was a shootout, one-sided. But apparently Jay Ajayi wanted to do his impersonation of Viserion for my 3-headed dragon and totally shit the bed and get lost. But, oh, sorry, spoiler alert. But, I don't really have much to say about my matchup. I mean, it was just an absolute bloodbath. And honestly, thank you, Nor, for doing that really softly and quickly right away on Thursday with Todd Gurley, 30 points, and Cooper Teacups, 1 point, piece of shit. Really set the tone for that matchup. And, you didn't let your foot off the pedal. But that's got to be, it just came to me, that's got to be the largest margin of victory in Gridiron Gala history. I think it was 90 points. That has to be. But nonetheless, and then next we have Gomez and Ferralis. Low scoring matchup, but I got to give it to Gomez. He's on a roll, 2-1. Really kind of just putting the patchwork together from Andy's team. But he's still staying super competitive. Got to give it to him. And then Corey and Tony, their matchup. How the hell Corey keeps scoring 90 points? I'm struggling to scramble for 70, and he's putting up. I'm so goddamn tired of that Gronk and Brady shit. Fuck. And to be honest, guys, I should have prefaced this. I didn't watch 1 minute of the Sunday games. Like I said, nor like thank you for putting me out of my misery. I went to Park City. I had some lunch. I had some dinner. I had a few drinks. It was great. I honestly didn't even watch any games on Sunday. So I was just looking at the box scores, to be honest. And Kevin, Jason, Kevin, I'm sorry for that first week of bashing you. Obviously, you're legit, man. And I'm not honest. I'm honestly not trying to be sarcastic, but a part of me wishes I didn't even. Why did I even go for a Jai and Zeke? I think it was 110 mil I'm spending, or $110. Shit, I keep doing that. But obviously, the recipe is Cohen and below. Again, I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but it's working out, man. Hulk Hogan doing his thing. And Sam and Mike, man, Mike, we're both 0-3, the 0-3 brothers, the Owens brothers. You can be Wilson. I'll be Clive, I guess. Obviously, I'm a children of men over here, but I don't know. I don't get it, man. We gotta stick together down here. Obviously, I don't want to be bear bitch, but it's going to be a fight all year, man. Sam, I mean, he got a great showing. The traded guys, Baldwin doing well, Hyde doing well. I don't think he started Nixon, but even he did well. I don't know. I think it's pretty much done with what I have. I'm just going to set my roster set and forget it, and see what happens. But and of course, I forgot Gomez. That's so rude. I didn't even mention our trade. That really got me bell, but man, I mean, Terrell Pryor, I'm trying to understand he's such a conundrum. I mean, 6'5", 240, runs a 4.5, 12-inch dick. I mean, I was slurping him all the way back to when he was a true freshman at Ohio State, just absolute specimen, but I don't know, he just can't put it together. I really thought so. Gomez he actually might really just turn out. But again, same thing with Joe Mixon. I really couldn't wait for development. I just needed points right away. So again, I'm sorry guys for not watching the games. I'm kind of just mentally checked out. So, but I'm hoping, and I really just want to keep doing this and coming back and hopefully things change up a little bit. But again, thanks guys. Hope I didn't waste too much of your time. And again, I'll see you guys next week. All right, thanks.
Weekly matchups!
Let's move on to our matchup preview section for week 4. So, Nor, what's a matchup next week that you'll be looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to the matchup between Mr. Slater versus Mr. Gomez, Team Hose and Hurricanes, and Team Making Prior Engagements for Tevin. Quick shout out to Gomez for the amount of Tevin Coleman related jokes I heard on Sunday. Just an outstanding performance.
I appreciate that.
Current projection for this is a 90-85 victory in favor of Mr. Slater. It'll be interesting to see which one of the two Matt quarterbacks. We've got Matty Ice versus the newly dubbed Matty Room Temperature. And we'll see, as we've alluded to many times in this episode, if Slater's stable of running backs can finally get on the same page.
The matchup I'm looking forward to in week 4 is Tony versus my co-host here, Nor. Really battle of the Titans here as the two put up a combined 287 fantasy points in week 3. It will be interesting to see who Tony decides to start at the wide receiver position. If Cooks' strong week 3 performance will give him the nod in week 4. Also, Tony's running back situation remains a conundrum as a struggling Howard and what was DeMarco Murray now shipped to Gomez's team, so he won't be getting the starts. So it looks like Tony will be running with Howard and C.J. Anderson for the time being. Nor will attempt to keep the dream alive and move to 4-0 against this strong competitor. Let's move on to a new segment this week. I'd like to introduce this new segment where I ask Nor about different players' fantasy stocks, and whether he thinks there is a potential for growth, if the player is showing everything he is capable of at the moment, or if the player is underperforming and has nowhere left to go but down. This segment is called Grower, Shower, or Nowhere.
But I will grow.
All right, Nor. Gomez, chime in if you want as well, of course. Let's start with our first player, Alex Smith. Currently ranked second in total quarterback fantasy points, but scored 30 points in week 1 and has only matched that total in the last 2 weeks combined. Alex Smith, guys, is he a grower, shower, or going nowhere?
I'd have to say he's a shower.
Show me your dick!
I think that is the early jump he got in week 1 showed the exact ceiling that you're going to get with Alex Smith. Since then, he's regressed a little bit more to the median, and I think that's about where he's going to live.
I got to agree with Nor here. This guy's a shower.
Show me your dick!
Kansas City's offense can beat you in a multitude of different ways. Kareem Hunt, Tyreek Hill, these guys can take handoffs to the end zone. They can also take a screen pass to the end zone, and I think that's how Alex Smith benefits with most of his points. That's not to say that he's a terrible quarterback. He's definitely not a game manager. I think he is a consistent starting quarterback in the NFL, and I think he's reached his ceiling.
All right, all fair points. Let's move on to our next player, Cameron Newton. Has not topped 230 passing yards yet this season and is sitting at 3 total touchdowns and 4 interceptions on the year. Currently ranked 26th in quarterback fantasy points. Guys, what is he?
I'm going to go ahead and call Cam a grower. I think that his rushing ability gives him a safe floor in terms of having something to build on. Obviously, coming off of shoulder surgery, he just needs time and reps to get back into the flow of things. He's missed plenty of open throws in the first 3 weeks, but I think that over time he's going to start to get back to his body being right and being able to make all those throws. The injury to Greg Olsen is unfortunate based on the timing and the fact that we're not even sure if he's going to come back this year, but I think Cam will be able to salvage what he's done so far.
I agree 100%, Nor. I think Cam Newton's an enormous grower. Just because what he has done in this league already. I don't know if the shoulder injury is really still bugging him, but Cam Newton, to me, he's done in this league. He's proven to be an MVP type caliber quarterback, and I definitely see him growing.
Okay. Moving on to the next player, Melvin Gordon, currently ranked 9th overall in running back fantasy points. Weirdly, exactly 13 fantasy points in each of his first 3 games. What is he, guys?
I'm going to say that Melvin's a grower as well. I think that his usage in the passing game has yet to be fully capitalized upon this year. I think last year you saw him as a 3-down back. He was rarely leaving the field. In the red zone, he got plenty of pass looks, and that helped add to his touchdown total last year. So far this year, whether it's just game flow or them wanting to save some reps or touches for him, I've seen him be on the field for all 3 downs some drives, and some drives he's catching a break after 2 downs. It might just be a script that the Chargers are seeing, but I think with more touchdown potential, he could do even better than he is.
I swear I'm not looking at your notes, Nor, but I agree 100% grower for Melvin Gordon. I think he hasn't been utilized in this offense the way he needs to be utilized. And I definitely see the Chargers using him in different fashions moving forward.
Okay, next player is going to be Chris Thompson. Currently the 3rd ranked running back in fantasy points, has only 27 touches through 3 weeks for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns.
I'd have to say that Chris is a shower. I think the amount of impact he's been able to have on the limited amount of touches that you just alluded to show that at some point the other shoe is going to have to drop in terms of his impact. Obviously, as a selfish Kirk Cousins owner, I'm happy to see that little checkdowns and screen passes are working out for Chris Thompson as well as they are. But I think that once this backfield shakes out in terms of health of Robert Kelly, maybe even the usage of Samaje Perine, and you don't know, this could all be a trickle-down effect of Jordan Reed already being banged up. Less targets to go around might mean less usage for Chris Thompson. So I think he's at his peak right now.
And I'm going to be biased here, and just because I have Chris Thompson, but I think he's a grower. I definitely think he's a grower because 27 touches through 3 weeks, I think is not enough for a person who is literally taking over games for the Washington Redskins. Fat Rob Kelly shouldn't be a starter. Chris Thompson should be. And I think we will see that here in the near future.
All right, guys. How about DeAndre Hopkins? 7 receptions in each of the first 3 games this season on a total of 37 targets. Currently 20th in wide receiver fantasy points.
I'm going to have to say he's a grower. Sort of similar to what we alluded to earlier with Cam. We've seen him perform at an elite level before in the league, and he's going to get peppered with targets continually. Deshaun Watson clearly knows where he needs to go with the ball, and based on volume alone and who else are they going to use in the red zone, you got to think his touchdown numbers are going to go up as well. So I'd like to say he's still got some room for impact.
Definitely a grower in my book as well, Sam. I think once DeAndre and Watson get on the same page, which you got to assume they eventually will, DeAndre's numbers got to go up. He's a grower. He's a grower, Cotton.
He's getting bigger, Cotton.
What a segment. What a segment. Keep it going.
All right. All right, the final player on this week's Grower, Shower, or Nowhere is Devontae Parker. He had a bye in week 1. He's currently averaging 10.5 fantasy points on 9.5 targets per game in his first 2 games. Guys, what is he?
Kind of hate to say this because I'm a fan of the player. I liked him in college. I actually wanted the Niners to draft him in the draft when he came out. I think he's a nowhere.
He's going fucking nowhere. Where you going? Nowhere.
And that is purely because he has proven to have a lot of difficulty staying on the field and staying healthy. I think the opportunity is going to be there with the way Cutler's already feeding him targets, the script of that offense, and the fact that their defense isn't very good. They're probably going to be down a lot of games. So I think the upside is there, but he just manages to not stay on the field. So I think he's going to end up missing valuable time.
I'm going to have to point Devontae Parker as a shower. I think this is going to be his ceiling. I think Adam Gase will start feeding the beast that is Jay Ajayi more. Miami has to stay in football games. And I don't see Devontae Parker taking over games for the Dolphins. So I got to say that he's a shower.
Okay, there you have it. Our first weekly segment with Nor and Gomez, special guest Gomez this week of Grower, Shower, and Nowhere.
What's up, faggot?
All right, moving on to our last segment. As is tradition, our review of the newly updated, the newly minted weekly Power Rankings.
It's the Power Rankings!
We'll start with number 10. Starting out with some potential controversy here, ranking a 2-win team below 2 winless teams. This is purely a matter of roster construction. Now, if Duke Johnson and Chris Thompson become every week starters, Gomez's team becomes a lot stronger. But I'm not sure they will have that amount of touches needed to do so. Gomez is averaging 53 points per week thus far, which is by far the worst in the league. The fact that he has managed a 2-1 start is outstanding, but he will need to perform more consistently in the points category before he rises in these power rankings. Number 9, Michael Ferralis, 1-2. Mike clocks in at the 9 spot here as his team still boasts some talented players, but they failed to perform against Gomez in week 3. Mike has to display some concern about his running back position as Crowell and Miller continue to underperform, and Amari Cooper's strong week 1 performance seems like it was a long time ago. Number 8, Alex Slater, 0-3. It was a poor showing in week 3, no doubt, but he still may be finding ways to make the pieces fit as he had a huge roster makeover just days before week 3's kickoff. The trio of Ajayi, Bell, and Elliott is undoubtedly the most talented group of running backs we have had in this league, but their ability to perform at a consistently high level has yet to be seen. Depth was sacrificed to achieve those running backs as well, so we'll see how Slater handles the bye-week gauntlet. Number 7, Mike Arriola, 0-3. I still see a lot of talent in this team as Julio Jones, Mike Evans, and LaShawn McCoy continue to underperform. Tyreek Hill has been a bright spot so far this season, but it could get ugly during the Chiefs' bye week as Mike is currently relying on Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and the Chiefs' defense. Still, To be ranked in this 7th spot with an 0-3 record is impressive. Number 6, Corey Hart, 1-2. Corey continues to struggle with his running back position, but I don't expect the Seattle defense to dip into the negatives on a consistent basis. This team is solid, but not spectacular, as the reliance on Brady and Gronk became painfully evident in Week 3. Number 5, Jason Bercease, 1-2. A 3-spot drop here as Jason put up a pathetic 33-point showing in Week 3. Sorry, JB, behind the glass. His team is obviously better than that, and Jason really suffered from the Raiders' poor showing Sunday night performance. I expect a bounce back next week, but Jason's lack of star power may really cap his weekly ceiling. Number 4, Kevin Wallen, 3-0. No movement here for Kevin as he remains holding at the number 4 spot. Though he is undefeated, it was the most impressive performance against a floundering opponent. Kevin's running back situation still has me worried. Number 3, Sam Nix, 2-1. The late week trade seems to have injected some life into this team as I scored 129 fantasy points, and in all honesty, with this team having Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin, and Jimmy Graham, a lot of emphasis will be placed on Wilson's shoulders to perform consistently. He may have turned a corner this week with his 30-point performance, but game flow may have dictated a majority of those fantasy points. This team will go as Russell Wilson goes, which is a scary proposition. Number 2, Tony Funston, 2-1. The Week 2 curse for Tony has shaken off as his team bounced back in a big way, scoring 135 points in his rout over previously ranked number 5, Corey Hart. Tony's key performers delivered in a big way in Week 3, and it appeared that Tony's running backs have finally broken out of their slump, making Tony a very dangerous team top to bottom. And of course, number 1, Nor Sandu, 3-0. In a convincing 152-point performance, Nor standing as the number 1 overall team is not up for discussion. His consistent running back performances were augmented in Week 3 by the strong bounce-back performances from Cousins, A.J. Green, and T.Y. Hilton. He looks unstoppable at the moment, and we may see some vulnerability as he takes on Tony next week. And there you have it, the Week 3 ending power rankings. Now, guys, I have 2 of you here. One is ranked 1, another is ranked 10. Nor, let me get your thoughts, and then Gomez will allow you to speak.
Thanks, Sam. I think the only changes I would make to these power rankings at first glance is that I would move Areola, basically swap him with Gomez and put him at last. That really just has to do with the fact that Areola bet big on his cash cows, and so far it hasn't come to fruition, and his ability to maneuver outside of the cap is going to hinder him. For Gomez, not only is he finding ways to get to 2-1, but he's making deals during the podcast as we speak. I think that alone bumps him up in the power rankings. And in terms of me being 1, Tony being 2, I think I just have to see how this matchup plays out this week. I have a tendency to underperform against Tony. It's probably the mind games of his team names and maybe even his just general athletic prowess.
Correct, Nor. That's why I had yours and Tony's matchup next week as my most anticipated matchup. We had 1 and 2 going against each other. We'll see who rises to the top. Now, Gomez, while I have you here, I ranked you 10th. You're 2-1. I can see where some anger or hostility would come from. What are your thoughts on your ranking?
I'd like you to suck my balls, please.
All right, Gomez just walked out the door. So with that, we are going to end this Week 3 recap of the Gridiron Gala. Thank you for listening. Special guest Gomez, thanks for stopping by. Nor, as always, my co-host, thank you for your very thrilling performance in tonight's podcast. And JB, of course, behind the actual glass that exists, thank you as well. This is Sam signing off for another episode of the Dual Threat Podcast.
Second.